And welcome to another engaging training session for our CFO community addressing leadership experiences by Ricardo Aguilera, who is the CFO of the Federal Reserve Board. Mr. Aguilera served as Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Financial Management and Comptroller until January 2017. In that role, he was the Principal Advisor to the Secretary and Chief of Staff of the Air Force on all financial matters. From 2010 until his Air Force appointment in 2016, he was the Director of Chief Financial Officer Academy at the NDU, National Defense University. Upon the conclusion of his appointment to the Air Force, Mr. Aguilera returned to the university. From 2006 to 2010, he held executive positions in the U.S. Department of Defense as the Special Assistant to the Deputy Comptroller for Program and Budget, as well as the Associate Director for Contingencies and International Affairs. Earlier in his career, he served at the Office of Management and Budget and, believe it or not with me, at the U.S. Government Accountability Office, which used to have a different name back then. Please give me a warm hand in welcoming Ricardo Aguilera.
All right, good afternoon. Wow, that was really lame, guys. Come on. It's just a little bit longer, okay? So, good afternoon. Good afternoon. There you go, perfect. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come and talk to you. It looks like you guys have had a wonderful program. It looks like tomorrow you've got even more to look forward to. John Ryder, I believe, is kicking you off tomorrow, and he was working with me in the Air Force. And you had Dave Weinberg here also with Air Force. And I know that he got you guys fired up, and he's going to do the same tomorrow for you. So I'm giving him a little bit of a plug. Just tell him that so that he can give me his kickback when he gets in tomorrow morning. But I want to thank DHS and ASMC for inviting me to talk to you. And I wanted to give you a little bit of a perspective on my career and some of the leadership lessons that I've picked up along the way. And offer you an opportunity perhaps to talk at the end. We talk a little bit together. I used to be a professor, so I am not averse to going into the crowd and asking you questions. So think about that before you head out the door. I am going to probably use the last few minutes of our time together to ask you a couple of questions. But, you know, our topic is leadership. And I want to start out with a little bit of a story about bad leadership, and you can tell me whether or not you think it's true, okay? So the head of a major department, I'm not going to mention any names, had been very successful in business and had amassed quite a fortune, and he wanted to use it to sort of impress his C-level executives, his CFO, his CIO, his chief technology officer, those sorts of folks. So he took them out to his home in Northern Virginia. He had a big spread in Northern Virginia, and they went in, and of course, on the first floor of his house, he had a lot of libraries and studies and that sort of thing, and they were really impressed, ooh, ah. And he took him around and then took him to his backyard, which of course was enormous, and he had a gigantic swimming pool in his backyard. But in the swimming pool, he had alligators. So they looked at him and they said, hey, pal, what's up with the alligators? He said, well, I'm a man that believes in courage and gumption. I pulled myself up from my bootstraps, and if any one of you can jump into that pool of alligators and swim to the other side, you can have anything you want, my home, my fortune, anything you want. They said, okay, he's a little crazy. Let's move on. Let's go on with the tour. So they did. You know, they went up to the second floor, and there were more studies and libraries. And one of the C-level executives looked out at the window and saw the CFO in the pool. And there he was swimming against the alligators, took off his jacket, hit it against one, took off his shoe, hit it against the other. Those executives made their way downstairs, ran to the other side of the pool just in time to see the CFO swimming out of the pool unharmed. So they all gathered up, ran to his side. The secretary pushed his way to the front of the crowd and said, my gosh, man, what a demonstration of courage and gumption. What do you want? My home, my fortune, what do you want? He said, I want to know who threw me into that pool. So there's a little bit of a lesson there about bad leadership. But you know, for us financial managers, leadership is a difficult subject. You know, Carl Weick, the psychologist, noted that managers have the map, but leaders have the compass. And it's hard to feel as though we have the compass when we are tied down. We're tied down by budget rules, appropriations language. We're tied down by yellow book standards, by audit plans. It doesn't seem like we are able to be leaders when we have to comply with so many requirements, but I would argue that financial managers have a special place in the bureaucracy as leaders. We have a unique place where we can influence the decision-making of our organizations, and we do that because our craft brings us a certain amount of authority. We're trusted because of our fiduciary responsibility, our analytical skills, and our impartiality. We bring that to the table, to the boardroom, where others do not in the decision-making hierarchy of our agencies. We use this credibility and influence in unique ways, but that credibility alone doesn't make us good financial leaders. I would argue that one of the first steps in being a good financial leader is understanding yourself. I'm going to steal a few concepts from a book that's been pretty meaningful to me. It's called Start With Why by Simon Sinek. Has anybody read Start With Why? Okay, great. You'll be familiar with some of these concepts. I would argue that to be a good leader, you have to understand yourself, and his sort of construct in understanding organizations and what makes them great and leaders and what makes them great really is useful for us. You know, if I asked you what you do, it would be pretty easy to explain. If I asked you how you do it, it would probably take a little bit more thought, but you could probably get there pretty quick. But if I asked you why you do what you do, and in our world, that's a really important question. Why do we do what we do? Understanding that why, I would argue, can lead to lasting success and fulfillment. Sinek applies it to organizations. Effective organizations, for example, understand their why. So he uses the example of IBM and Apple, and he kind of makes a comparison of the two using a sales pitch, perhaps, that they would have made a few years back. So think about IBM. What kind of a sales pitch would IBM have made? They would have said something like, we make mainframe computers that help companies analyze data and make better decisions. Buy one from us. What would Apple have said? Apple might have approached it like this. We challenge the status quo in everything we do. We believe in pushing the edge in technology and design. Oh, we happen to make computers. You want to buy one from us? Which one would you buy one from? What organization is mired in its what and how? Which organization is in tune with its why? Which one do you want to lead? Which one do you want to be? That's the question that he asks. But it starts with a hard look at yourself, and that is rooted in the biology of the brain, he would argue. Imagine the cross-section, imagine the brain, imagine a cross-section of the brain as a target, a target with rings. On the outer edge of the ring, you would have what and then how in the outer edges of the ring of a target. And in evolution, the most recent addition to our brains is the neocortex. It's where we make cost-benefit decisions. It's where our capacity for language resides. It's essentially the part of the brain that is the newest and distinguishes us from the animal community. But the animal community relies on something called the limbic brain. In that target, imagine that it's at the center, the bullseye of that target. It's where the why resides. It's that fight or flight reaction. It's that gut feeling when something feels right or doesn't feel right. It's really at the core of decision making and the core of why. Why do you do what you do? Why do I care? Why am I here? Those are questions that you need to answer for yourself as a leader before you can lead your organizations. And when you come to an organization, I would offer, those are the questions that you should be asking of the organization. Why do we do what we do? Not just what, not just how. We can't refine just those. If we dig deeper into the why, we understand our organization better and can change it. So when I came to work for the federal government, I thought I understood my why very well. My parents were immigrants from Cuba. This country gave me more opportunity than I ever would have had in Cuba. I wanted to do something important in the United States. I wanted to work in national security. I wanted to help defend my country. This motivation, this why, drove me for a long time. I worked on important projects at GAO, like with Burl. I helped lead budgeting for the war after the attacks of September 11th when I was in OMB. I was promoted into the SES. I went over to the Defense Department Comptroller and did more of that kind of work. I thought I understood my why pretty well. But my why changed dramatically when my late wife was diagnosed with terminal cancer. I was in the middle of a very hectic career as an SES in the Defense Department. Her diagnosis came without warning, and it was a rare cancer. My why crystallized during that time. I was offered an opportunity to teach at National Defense University, and I took that opportunity with both hands. I gave up my SES job, I gave up my SES title, and I was able to focus on my sons and my late wife until she took her last breath. I was totally at peace with that decision. It changed the way I looked at my life, my career, and my future. Years later, when President Obama nominated me to be the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Financial Management, I again asked myself why. Why would I want to do this kind of job? Why would I want to return to that kind of life? My motivation was completely different from the motivation that I had when I was nominated to be an SES or before. During my late wife's illness, my family had benefited enormously from the kindness and compassion of so many people. Friends, family, even strangers reached out to us in ways that I could never hope to repay. Over the years, during that time, I vowed that I would pay it forward. I talked over my motivation with my sons and my new fiancée. They are a huge part of my why. They understood, and they told me, go for it, and I did. After the Senate confirmed me and I took over the role, I was glad for the opportunity to do some good for the Air Force and my country, but more importantly, I wanted to pay it forward. I wanted to pay forward the kindness that we had received as a family. And each day, as the SAF FM, I was reminded of the mission that Anglican minister John Wesley spoke of. He once said, do all the good that you can by all the means that you can, in all the places you can, in all the ways you can, at all the times you can, to all the people you can, as long as ever you can. As a leader, I can think of no better mission for any organization. Think about our organizations. Are our goals as leaders reflected in our organizations? Do these goals reflect our values? Why does an organization exist? Why do we do the things we do? Is there a better way? Can we help others in doing this? When confronted with these issues in the Air Force, I tried to look through that lens. It wasn't about me. It was about making the best choices to help the most people do the best good for as long as possible. For example, that was the barometer that I used whenever I tried to make a decision. How can I help the Air Force make the best use of its resources for as long as possible to help the most people that it can? When I arrived in the Air Force, I had to sort through issues that emerged from a previous reorganization of Air Force headquarters and the financial management staff. In order to resolve those issues, I needed to break apart an organization within the Air Force financial management and then move it to another part of Air Force headquarters. My office could have held on to that organization. If I were thinking selfishly, if I were thinking about me, it could have been the stepping stone to build a very small bureaucratic empire within the Air Force, but I didn't see it that way. I wanted to do it because I wanted to optimize the effectiveness of that office, but also because I saw that the current structure was only working because the personalities in charge of that structure were making it work. And further on down the road, that just wasn't going to work, either for me or my successor. And that's the person that I was thinking about. How do I relieve headaches for that person? So in order to prevent management problems, I took action. I talked to the staff that was affected. I sat down with them. I listened to their concerns about an impending move. I tried to make it as easy as possible for them. And then in the end, I think that decision was a good one for everybody involved. It seemed to go smoothly, and to this day, it still works. I tried to follow the same philosophy when I confronted other issues in the Air Force, whether it was their massive accounting ERP called DEAMS, or when it was putting together the final touches for the fiscal year 18 budget that would put the Air Force on a path to the future. All of these instances, I thought about what could do the most good for the most people for as long as possible. I also relied on some enablers that I've developed throughout my career. So let's talk a little bit about enablers for leadership. The first and most important enabler for a leader, I think, is compassion and caring. No organization can succeed for long if that organization doesn't believe that its leadership truly cares about them and has their back. One of my primary goals, no matter where I was to take care of the team, assess them where they are strong, help them where they are weak, and shape them to be their best. Give them the chance to develop and grow. Shield them from all that extraneous stuff so that they can concentrate on getting the most important jobs done and done right. And always support them as best I can. When your team knows they have your back, you have their back, they will go the extra mile for you. But a leader can be the most compassionate person on earth, and without communication, it doesn't mean very much. So my second enabler is always strong, honest, and direct communication. Communicate goals to them, listen to their feedback, and take it to heart. Change course, admit when you're wrong. Understand what they're telling you. A lot of them represent a lot of knowledge, more than I'll ever have coming into an organization. So as I like to tell the teams that I've led, I fully expect that sometimes as a leader, I'm going to be that windshield, and sometimes I'm going to be the bug. All I ask is that they give me a little warning when I'm going to be the bug, so that I can see the windshield coming at me. Part of communication, an important part of communication, is listening. Nature gave us a very physical reminder about how important it is to listen. They gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. So it's twice as important to listen than it is to talk. And that's something that I've tried to bring into every organization that I've worked in. I've tried to listen to what the experts are telling me. I've tried to listen to what the dynamics and the context are in the organization that I'm going into. You know, a study was done by sociologists many years ago where they tried to break down why does communication occur in nature at all between the animal kingdom and man. And they basically deduced that all communications, whether it is plants, animals, or humans, occurs for 3 reasons. It occurs to inform, to persuade, or to entertain. And there are sometimes combinations of the 3 in communication, no matter what is going on between what group is happening. As leaders, we need to know when to listen, but we also need to know when to persuade, we need to inform, or just to ease the mood. So I'll give you another example from my career. When I was at OMB, I was the acting chief in charge of the team that put together the initial supplemental requests for the global war on terror. As you can imagine, those were chaotic and politically charged times after 9/11. Our boss in my team had been forced to leave because he didn't see eye to eye with the OMB leadership back then. The tumult that followed filled my team with doubt and almost ruined our morale. As a leader, I needed to listen to them and to find the way to build them back. I shielded them as much as I could from the political storm gathering around us, and in some ways, I needed to be the example to help keep them moving forward. It was a challenge to protect my team from all that extraneous stuff and keep them on the job, focused on the job. If I hadn't listened to their concerns, I wouldn't have been successful. But it worked, and we were actually recognized by OMB for our efforts. Another enabler is setting goals for yourself and for your organization and working towards those goals. A Jesuit priest and philosopher named Balthazar Gracian wrote a book called The Art of Worldly Wisdom. And in that book, he wrote, "Dreams will get you nowhere, but a good kick in the pants are going to take you a long way." So I've had both, dreams and the kick in the pants. And often the kick in the pants got me more forward momentum than any of my dreams. Earlier in my career, somebody told me to set realistic goals and stretch goals for myself. And I thought that that was a good way not only for me to approach my career, but also for an organization to approach the future. Have a goal and a stretch goal. Leaders should set the vision and the tone and keep organizations moving towards the near-term goal, but that vision of the far-term goal. For yourself, I urge you to think of those goals in terms of something that will fulfill you. There's nothing worse than to spend a long time achieving a career goal that you later learn is an empty accomplishment. Don't be afraid to change your situation if you don't think it's a good fit. There were a couple of times where I was in a job that didn't feel right. I won't tell you which ones they were. Every time I made a switch, though, I got some unexpected benefit from it. There's something you learn from every experience, even the bad ones. So I'd urge you as leaders to do the same for your organizations. Don't be afraid to switch course. Think carefully about the long-term goals of the organization. How do they benefit the organization? Are they a way to bring glory on the leader, or are they a way to really advance the goals of the organization and do as much good for the people of that organization as possible? One more enabler I like to use that I've used successfully in my career is thinking 2 layers up. Okay, so what does that mean? It means not just understanding what your boss is concerned about, but what his or her boss is concerned about. I think it helps you to be a good leader because, number one, it forces you to observe and learn what good leaders do. So you watch the boss's boss. It also helps you to avoid learning bad lessons, and it helps you to anticipate what's coming down the road and identify challenges early to try to get ahead of them. So how do you think like your boss's boss? Well, first of all, you watch them. And think about what they do. Their actions, of course, speak louder than words, and you understand what their context is, what they're working in. For example, I've had big bosses who were political appointees that thought more about the politics of an issue than what the actual program or budget implications of an issue might be. It helped me prepare my boss then for how to approach an issue with that person. In some cases, my boss didn't necessarily think about the politics of an issue the same way as the big boss, so I tried to compensate by doing both, putting the lens on the political implications as well as the budget and program impacts. Thinking as your boss's boss helps you anticipate what might be coming up, keeps you 2 steps ahead. It's an important point because leaders need to anticipate where their organizations are going. And they need to keep an eye on what the senior-most decision makers are thinking so that you can position your organization to help them be successful. Understanding that context helps senior leaders with you and you with them. But you have to keep in mind always who it is that's getting the real work done. So, for example, I've worked for organizations that were led by very tough leaders. One of the reasons those people were tough was because of the environments that they worked in. For example, OMB can have an adversarial relationship with a lot of the agencies it oversees. When I was at OMB during the early days of the war, OMB and DoD had a very adversarial relationship at the leadership level. One of my goals was understanding where my boss's boss was coming from. However, at a staff level, I tried to keep those working relationships as smooth as possible. I tried to make sure that the OMB team always worked successfully with the DoD team. And it wasn't always easy, but it really helped keep the job moving smoothly, even when the elephants in the room were clashing. So related to this is to build your network. That's sort of another enabler. Keep in touch with people you respect. Ralph Waldo Emerson once wrote, "Go often to the house of your friends, or weeds will choke the path." Learn from them. Keep them close. As I tell my sons, surround yourself with people that you like, who challenge you to be a better person and enrich your life. Do the same with your network. Find people you like, who challenge you, who enrich your life. The bridges that you build to others as leaders will help your organization. I continue to keep my relationships with my former teammates at OMB, the Air Force, and other places that I've worked. Not only has it been enriching to me, but it's also paid dividends to get the job done. Whenever anybody had an issue with OMB, for example, they would tap me to help them find a solution. I could use my informal influences to get the job done. One last piece of advice for you, though, is remember to which kind of brings us full circle, is to keep work and life in balance. No amount of success at work will make up for failure at home. A good leader knows this about his people, too. Most of your staff is working to put food on their table. If you show them that family and friends and loved ones are as important to you as they are to them, it will help you to take care of them. Your organizations will thrive as a result, I guarantee you. You only get this chance to live life once. Obsessing over the small stuff in the office really isn't living. Remember the why. Keep the big picture in mind. Why do you do what you do? Who do you do it for? Hopefully, you're doing what you do out of love for those that you love. If you guide yourself based on your why, I guarantee you that you will live a more fulfilling life and have a more fulfilling career as a result. So, what I'd like to do with our remaining time is I'd like you to pick a person next to you, perhaps someone that you did not come with. I'm going to go into the audience in about 2 minutes, and I'm going to ask you your thoughts on the following question. What are the 3 most important leadership lessons that CFOs need to keep in mind? So I'd like you to take 2 minutes, introduce yourself first to the person next to you, perhaps someone that you didn't come with. Talk about what are the 3 most important leadership lessons that CFOs need to keep in mind, and we're going to share them with the group. Okay? Sound good? Everybody know what they're doing? All right, go. Oh, great. All right. This is very good. A lot of really good conversations going on. Like I said, I used to be a professor, and I'm not afraid to ask you questions. So you know what? I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the back of the room because, you know, I'm Catholic and all the Catholics hang out in the back of the church. So first I'm going to stand here and I'm going to ask for a volunteer. Is there anybody who wants to tell us a little bit about what they talked about? The 3 leadership lessons that CFOs should keep in mind. A lot of no hands. All right, wait, the gentleman in the orange shirt. So I'm going to go back all the way to the last row to Byron. What did you talk about, Byron? And hang on, I'm going to take this off so you can talk.
Okay. We talked about the 3 things being most important. Number 1, taking care of your people. Number 2 is honest communications, open communications with your staff. And number 3 is the ability to maximize your resources to meet the highest priority strategic goals of your organization.
Great. All right, first of all, let's give him a round of applause. So you're working with Byron? Yes. Okay, great. You know, Dr. Stephen Covey talks about putting first things first and putting the most important things in your life first and showing that by giving it the most amount of your time. So you kind of talked about putting those resources to the greatest effectiveness. That's sort of like putting first things first, I think. Would you agree with that? So people are the number 1 priority in taking care of your people, but organizing it in a way that makes sense to the mission, I think, is putting first things first. Would you agree with that? Yeah. Okay, good. Great. Anybody else? I had another hand here. There we go. I can like stretch this only so far. So
I can yell.
You can yell.
Yes. Loud.
So your name first?
My name is Kevin,
Kevin, hi.
and I would say one of the things we talked about, I talked with John here, is that people don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care, and also that you can't fake caring. You can pretend to be nice, and you can say nice things, and you can do the little tricks about that, but when the going gets tough, and people start to see how you crack down, then they see how you really act. So that was, we didn't get to the third one. You didn't give us enough time.
I didn't give you enough time. It's because I don't care.
I could tell that.
No, thank you. So that's absolutely true. They watch your staff, the people that you're leading watch what you do. You are under a microscope at all times. And so when you show them by example, when you lead by example that you care, they see it. And my experience has been, and I don't know if this has been your experience, but if you show it, it starts to get infectious and people start doing a little bit and going a little bit of extra mile for each other. And so one of the things that I think I try to instill in all the teams that I've been part of is, you know, it's not just about all of us working towards one goal, it's all of us helping each other working to one goal. And so it's not just you, the leader sort of extending his hand or her hand and helping the group, but it's each other helping and extending their hands to each other. And hopefully if that dynamic repeats itself, it leads to forward momentum for the whole organization. Would you agree with that? Maybe.